Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The women's boxing at the Olympic Games in Paris has been dominated by a row over the sex of two competitors. The decision to allow boxers Imani Khalif of Algeria and Lin Yuting of Taiwan to participate in the Games has been heavily scrutinised after they both failed a gender eligibility test given by the International Boxing Association last year. There was widespread outrage when Italian boxer Angela Carini abandoned her match with Khalif after 46 seconds, saying she had to preserve her life. But the International Olympic Committee has strongly defended the athletes, pointing out they have always competed as women. So to discuss this controversy, I'm delighted now to be joined by the Director of Sport at Fair Play for Women, Fiona McAnena. Welcome to the show. Thank you. Fiona, I'd like you to clarify for us. There has been an eligibility test which was conducted by the International Boxing Association. These two athletes were disqualified from the World Boxing Championships. Is that right?
This is what the IBA have said, and they have apparently written to the IOC and told them all about it. But there's a row here between the International Boxing Association and the IOC. Nothing to do with gender, and it goes back to governance issues and accusations of corruption. So what we're seeing here is the politics of boxing has led to the IOC basically taking over running the boxing at the Olympics, and they did that in Tokyo and they've done it again this time. So these are their rules being played out.
Now this is really interesting because this is actually not to do with transgenderism. That's not what the issue here. The issue here is to do with a women's category in sport potentially being violated effectively. Now, my understanding is that the implication of the tests from the IBA was that the two athletes in question had XY chromosomes and had a competitive advantage, which sounds like code for had gone through male puberty. But we don't know because we haven't got the actual test results, have we?
We don't know if the IOC have been given the test results because it's claimed that they were given them. Who knows? We don't know what the truth is because those two organisations are at loggerheads.
Yes.
But it's not new, this problem. You know, if you go back to Rio in 2016, the Rio Olympics, in the 800 metres, all the medals went to athletes with the same condition we subsequently discovered, which is 46XY 5ARD. Caster Semenya was the gold medalist. They are all people who looked like baby girls when they were born because of a disorder, and when they grew up, it turned out they were able to produce and process testosterone. They went through puberty, and they have that enormous male advantage. So
someone like Caster Semenya, with a lot of people will know, is a male, but did not know that growing up. Now, if you're someone who grows up thinking that you are female, then puberty hits and you suddenly discover that you've got this condition, this DSD condition, and you're actually male, that's going to be quite difficult. I mean, there should be a degree of compassion for someone going through that, right?
Yes, and it's very unlikely to happen in a developed country with good access to healthcare. And that's one of the reasons why you tend to see these athletes coming out of much poorer countries where it's more likely to go in undetected for longer. So it's true, when the IOC says these people were born female, grew up female, what they mean is they were registered female at birth. And then, as you say, something happened, puberty typically, but whatever compassion we might have for the trauma that may cause, we also have to have compassion for the women who are having to fight against these people in the boxing. There were famous scenes where they've been played again recently of the Scottish 800-metre runner Lindsay Sharp, from Rio, who came sixth, but she should have had an Olympic bronze medal. And the three women who came fourth, fifth and sixth basically said it was like we were running a separate race. So, you know, whatever compassion we have for people with DSDs, we have to recognise that it's not a consolation prize to get to go in the women's category and get to be an Olympian when you're just an average male runner, as Semenya was.
Let's just have a look. We've got a statement from the IOC spokesman, Mark Adams. This was on Friday. He said, the Algerian boxer, he's talking about Imani Khalif there, was born female, was registered female, lived her life as a female, boxed as a female, has a female passport. This is not a transgender case. There has been some confusion that somehow it's a man fighting a woman. This is just not the case. On that, there is consensus. Scientifically, this is not a man fighting a woman. Now, if it were the case, Fiona, that the results come out, and in fact, this athlete does not have a DSD, this athlete is in fact female, you would accept that this person should be in the women's category?
Yes, and I think if this athlete is female, that should be very easy to prove. I don't know how the IOC spokesman can say so categorically that he knows all this.
Unless he means by born female they assumed was female at birth.
I think that's what he means, and maybe he means, well, what he has said repeatedly is that passport is the passport sex is what they're talking about. So if it's an F on the passport, he says that's good enough for him. Well, I don't think that is good enough in a boxing ring.
And of course, you know, from the boxer's perspective, coming from Algeria, where there's very conservative values in terms of sex differences, this is different. Maybe this is why Imani Khalif does not want to reveal the details, because it could cause lots of problems back home.
That could be, but again, that doesn't make it acceptable, because Imani Khalif doesn't have to be in the public eye. You know, the point at which it became apparent that this person, if this person doesn't really legitimately qualify to be in a women's sporting event, is the point at which they should have pulled back.
And you know, we can talk about the unfairness of you know, various athletes at the Rio Games taking all the 3 top medals, etc. That's an issue of fairness. This actually escalates in boxing to an issue of safety, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, when people say, well, you don't know anything about this boxer and just believe us when we say that she's a woman, I think we also have to recognise that some of these top women boxers like Angela Carini, when they're in the ring and they feel what's going on, they know. They instinctively know. You know, they're among the best in the world. They spar with men as part of their training because there aren't enough really talented women around who are as good as them. They know what they're facing. And
my understanding, you know, is with sex differences in sport, there is always some kind of overlap sometimes. But when it comes to punching, when it comes to the physical force of the upper body, there isn't.
No, I mean, the weight for weight, because, of course, in boxing we do match people by weight, a man can punch more than twice as hard as a woman, 162% more. But just to your point about there is some overlap, yeah, among all men and all women, if we all went for a run, there's some overlap. But if you take highly trained men and highly trained women, there's no overlap. If you take, you know, teenage boys and teenage girls, there's no overlap. So if you're matching sets, which is, of course, what happens in sport, there is no overlap.
OK, well, I just want to move on to another question, which is about the British Medical Association, because this week they have voted and announced that they want the CAS review to be ditched, not to be implemented, and to everyone to just go back to administering puberty blockers to kids in spite of the evidence. What's going on there?
Quite extraordinary, isn't it? I think people should remember that the BMA is a trade union. It is not representative of medical opinion in the UK. It's representative of the rights of doctors, and particularly, I think, GPs, but or maybe all doctors. And like a lot of unions, you know, it's run by a minority of the members. They were very there was no transparency about this. So first they said there was a motion, then they wouldn't say if they'd voted on it, then they wouldn't say what the result was, and finally they came out and said this. And they've now set up a little working group to look at it, which is quite breathtakingly arrogant, that a bunch of people, GPs, think that they can set up a little project team to review the CAS review, which itself took 4 years, had a, you know, number of people involved, including a former head of the Royal College of Paediatrics and a specialist team at the University of York to look at all the research. So I think what's going on is that some activists in the medical profession, and we all know there are such people, have decided that it's pretty uncomfortable that the gravy train is ending, and they voted on it and said we support transitioning children, which is pretty shocking.
The ideology is a hell of a drug, you know, and I think a lot of these people are ideologically captured. But surely it must be the case that the majority of people in the BMA, the majority of doctors, understand the professionalism, the rigour that went into the CAS review, and to just dismiss all of that, I just don't understand.
Well, I think if you're committed to a belief system rather than evidence, it really doesn't matter how much evidence there is. I mean, one other thing that should comfort people is that the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, so all the real specialists, they collectively have put out a statement in response to the BMA's vote to say we stand behind this review and it should be implemented as soon as possible.
Because we've had Wes Streeting in the Labour Party saying the Labour Party will be implementing the CAS review. I know there's been a lot of pushback from various medical bodies around the world, again, dominated by activists, group like WPATH, for instance.
Of course.
Which is, as far as I can see, an activist body. But are you confident that ultimately the findings of the CAS review will win out, it will have global ramifications, and gender-affirming care will be a thing of the past?
I think that there's a very strong push for the revenue streams to keep going. Private healthcare in the US is still going. I think the only thing that will stop that is lawsuits. The biggest problem with lawsuits is that they get timed out. So what happens is that by the time someone realizes that transition was a mistake, it may be 5, 6, 8 years down the line, and it's too late to bring a medical malpractice suit. So there's work going on in the US, not by us, but by people there, to try and get that changed, because I think until the money is stopped, I think there's still a great deal of interest in pursuing these treatments among some small proportion of the medical profession.
Well, Fiona, thanks ever so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate it.